In the previous video, we just implemented a custom middleware of our own called MyLogger. Now it's a super simple middleware, but it showed us how we can create middleware of our own. Now, as already came with our Express app when we created it, there was a bunch of middleware inside of that app, already included and already implemented. And we didn't really get to see how that works, so we're going to do a quick video here of showing how we might implement third-party middleware that we find that already handles some custom edge case that we need in our application. For example, in this example right here, we've got something that handles really cool HTTP errors. We've got something that handles parsing cookies and logging stuff. And then we've got our custom ones that handle our own type of logging, as well as handling routes. Now, sometimes we want our application, because it might be pushing a lot of data from our API to our clients, we may want to make those requests and responses faster to the client. To do that, a lot of times what you can do is ask your application to use gzip, a compression library, to compress both what's coming in from the client, because this will tell the client that you handle gzip, and then for compressing our responses back to the client so that the JSON data that we're sending back is compressed using gzip before it goes across the network. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody has used some form of zip archive to send information to another person or to a business. And we usually use what's called just zip. And we zip up a bunch of files together to really compress the size in order to send it across the internet more effectively and efficiently. Well, web servers can do the same thing using a library called gzip. Now, there is some cool middleware out there already written by somebody else to handle making sure that the client and the server are passing information back and forth in a compressed format using gzip. One of those libraries is simply called compression. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to set up that particular library right now as middleware in our application and see how we might, through that middleware, simply add gzip compression to our requests and responses without really doing anything or any custom coding of our own in our application. This, of course, makes building applications and adding cool functionality to our applications super simple because somebody else already did the heavy lifting for us and they made their code available to us for free. And let's go ahead and let's begin the process of installing a third-party piece of middleware and then adding that middleware to the processing of our HTTP requests and see how easy that really can be. So we're going to go ahead and go to our terminal right here. And if we look at our package.json right here, we can see our dependencies. And we really want to add compression as a dependency for our application when it's running in production. To do that, we're just going to do npm install. Oops. And then we're going to say compression and then -- save. When we hit enter on that, it's going to go to npm. It's going to pull the library compression. And then it's going to add it right here as a dependency in our application. Now, one thing right here is when you install NPM packages, if there are vulnerabilities that are found inside of any of the packages in your NPM, you'll get this warning down here telling you that some of your NPM packages might have dependencies that have vulnerabilities in them. And it's probably a good idea to always make sure that you do an NPM audit fix on your NPM and then just let it go through and try to resolve all those errors and make sure that you don't have any vulnerabilities in your code. And here it went through. It tried to fix some of those vulnerabilities, but found that 4 of them are going to have to be fixed manually. So we're not going to worry about that right now, but you would want to make sure you get all of these fixed before you push your code to production. Since we're in development right now, I'm not really going to worry about it. Let's go over here to our app.js, and now that we have compression right here installed as a package in our node_modules folder, we now have access to it in our app.js. So we're going to do what we do with all middleware, and we're going to say let compression equal require, and then of course, because it's in our node modules, it's not a local file within our application, we can just go ahead and say import compression without any path information. Now we have compression pulled into our application, and this is the full-blown library right there, and it is set up to be middleware. And because it's set up to be middleware, we can simply come down here and before anything else, or probably, let's see, we've got our logger right here, Express.js. Let's just add it before our logger. Let's make it the first middleware we've got. So we'll do app.use, and then we're going to go ahead and use our compression. So compression, now this compression library, because it's got a whole lot of code and cool things it does, it needs to set itself up. So we're going to execute it. And then of course, when it executes, it's going to return a middleware function that will be able to handle compressing the data. Through this library, we have now added to our application the functionality for handling gzipped compressed information or requests from clients, as well as it will now go through the process of making sure that all of the information we send back to our user through our response is now compressed using the gzip compression algorithm. And our responses and our requests between the client and the server are now going to be much smaller and move much faster across the network, which means our application will fill much faster to the user. That is how simple it is to add third-party custom middleware. One thing you just need to do is you need to make sure that when you are implementing a third-party piece of middleware, that you know how that middleware is supposed to be set up. Now, most of the time, you'll notice that these middleware require you to actually execute them when you use them. And that, of course, is done with the parens right here, because, of course, this tells JavaScript to execute this particular function. Now, you'll notice that most of these actually have or require execution to happen, and that is because they are full-blown libraries, and they need to do some setup before they give you back the actual middleware function, like this right here is what would get passed back. They need to do some setup. And it's important to understand that, because if we were to just do this and try to run the application without executing that middleware so it can set itself up, we would get all kinds of errors because it needs to be executed. And that comes from making sure that you read the documentation for the middleware. So if we do npm and we go to npm's website and then we search for compression, that particular library, and then we look up compression, and we see right here that it's a Node.js compression middleware. It uses gzip and deflate to support compression of the content. And here, if you go step by step, you can see that you, of course, need to do npm install compression. You need to require compression. It tells you about how compression works. You need to make sure you understand all of this. And then down here, it'll show you that once you imported compression, when you're going to use compression, it has to do some kind of configuration. And of course, with most libraries, there's a default configuration, which means you're not passing a options object to the function to set it up. It uses all of its defaults. But if you want to change some of the defaults, which it tells you about inside of its documentation right here, you can change the defaults by passing a configuration object to the library when you execute the library. All right. Hopefully that helps you understand how to implement a third-party library, that you need to make sure you read the documentation and that you are setting up that library correctly in order to make sure that that third-party middleware works effectively inside of your application and does what is expected.